All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to CheloniaCast, episode 10. We're super excited. We're still in the early stages of this project, but it's coming along really nicely, and we're super overwhelmed by the support we've been getting. And uh, going to mention kind of early on here, the Turtle Room has generously sponsored us and given us some startup resources. We're in the process of building a CheloniaCast student fund where we're going to collect some donations to ultimately create sort of a little kind of pile of money to fund some student research, Chelonian student research oriented projects. So that's going to be fun. But just a huge shout out to the Turtle Room for helping us out with this project. So today's going to be an awesome episode. We've got a really cool guest line up for you today. We have the co-founder of the Turtle Conservancy, Maurice Rodrigues, with us. He's currently also on the advisory board of the Turtle Conservancy and has been on the board of directors in the past. And he's a really kind of well-known turtle conservationist, and we're super excited to have you on today, Maurice. So thanks for coming on.
Hey, no problem. I'm happy to be here.
Right on. So to get into the discussion and interview here, we'd like to open it up with just like why turtles? How do you get into them? I know it's kind of a cliche question, but it tends to get the ball rolling a bit.
Yeah, I guess my earliest memories are, my father. My father has an upholstery business for over 50 years now, and he was working on a boat in southern New Jersey, and he happened to have to go through the Pine Barrens. And while he was driving to this job, he found an eastern box turtle, and he thought he'd bring it home. And of course, that's not the right thing to do. Take turtles out of the wild, especially in Pine Barrens, sensitive area. But this was long time ago, 1975, and he didn't know any better, and he brought it home, and that really started my addiction. I just when he brought that thing home, I just was fascinated. I couldn't believe how beautiful it was, and then I just started to really get into it, like really start researching and reading. Back then, 1975, there was no internet, there's no smartphones, so you had to go to the library. And I remember going to the library in our just looking for books on turtles and starting to read those books and reading about all the people, especially Peter Pritchard. I do remember at that time the Encyclopedia of Turtles, and I wanted that book so bad, and it all started from that one box turtle.
That's interesting. It's like a very there's like a pattern of everybody we interview has a somewhat similar story of what sparks it for them. Like so the earliest memories I can think of were also box turtles that would come into my yard, and I don't see that much anymore. But there used to be several that would. At my old house, we lived more in the woods, and I would find them and just play with them for hours, or I would keep them for a little while, which I mean wasn't supposed to do, but I didn't know better when I was 5 years old, and then I just would let them go back in the yard, and eventually somebody gave me our neighbors gave me a pair of red-eared sliders, and I kept them for like 6 or 7 years, and it just kind of grew from there over time.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I've got a similar route, I guess, but I kind of got into it more through the literature side. So like the second aspect there, because I'm Southern California, so we don't really have. I mean, we've got turtles here, but I didn't find a turtle and then get into it. I kind of picked up the books, and I realized more than these animals are extremely fascinating, but also just like through Pritchard's encyclopedia, you realize how much you can kind of cover that goes beyond turtles and into biodiversity and traveling and experiencing all these culture and everything through pretty much everything through the lens of chelonians. But
That's pretty wild. But
yeah,
I think it's important to connect with these animals in nature. That's the biggest thing. I think when you connect with animals in nature, it makes you want to preserve nature, and I think that's a really important point to get out there. Is people, especially young people your age, that have time and aren't paying mortgages yet and don't have kids to raise, you got to get out there. You got to get in nature, no matter where it is, whether it's your backyard or some exotic place. But the more connection you have with nature, the more you're going to want to preserve it and take care of these animals, whether it's turtles or salamanders or whatever.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that's a good segue into you're talking about some of these exotic places and these connections. So you've definitely traveled a lot over the years. What are some of the most kind of memorable trips that you've had looking for turtles or just
Oh
animals in
man,
general?
how much time do we have? Exotic. So we'll start with that. So first of all, my family's from Brazil. Okay, so I was born in America, but both of my parents were born in Brazil. My sister also. So my first recollection of anything exotic was, when we would visit Brazil. There was a time in 1979. I was 9 years old, and we were going to move back to Brazil. My parents decided, we're gonna leave America and go back to Brazil, and we lived there for a year. And during that year, I remember, people in Brazil would have, turtles in their backyard a lot, and a lot of redfoots and a few yellowfoots here and there. But it was common for in Brazil for people to have backyards with turtles in them. It was like a good luck thing or whatever. And fruits grow naturally everywhere in Brazil, so it wasn't a problem to feed your tortoises. They would just eat whatever fruits were growing in your yard. But I do remember going out in nature and looking for turtles and tortoises in Brazil. That was exciting. Especially you would see trechemis in lakes and ponds and stuff like that. Trechemis dorbignai, most likely. I was 9, so I don't know that I ID'd everything properly back then. Um, but not a huge variety of species because I didn't get into anything, crazy, being 9 years old and always having to have parents around or someone. But that was probably my first, experience into the exotic. Uh, but yeah, I've been a lot of places. Uh, you know, I do remember also when I was 15. So when I was 15, I begged my parents to let me go to Brazil with my best friend at the time. His name was George Shea, and he was also 15, and so we're begging our parents to let us go alone to Brazil. This is 1985, and our parents, I don't know how we did it, but we convinced them to just let us go. Okay. And I have family there, so remember that. So it's not like we were going to go there and be alone there, although we kind of were. So we save all this money from working in the summer jobs, and we buy our ticket. The ticket was expensive. That was the most expensive part. And I remember getting all this gear. Like we bought inflatable rafts. We had all this like nets, like stuff we could have just bought there, but we're like, oh, we're gonna bring all this stuff because we're gonna explore the crap out of Brazil. And we go to Brazil. We board a flight. Our parents have to sign all this paperwork to let us go along. And so we get there and we meet family, and we immediately, we're like, we got to get out in the wild. And they're like, are you nuts? You're 15. Where are you going? But we ended up actually taking buses in Brazil. It's very cheap to travel the country by bus. So we went from São Paulo to Rio by bus, and we stopped anywhere there was like a pond or a forest that we could get to. We go out and look for stuff. Sadly, we didn't find any turtles in the wild. Not a single turtle, because we were just in too much of a congested, like a city type area. São Paulo is a sprawling city, and that's where my family's from. They weren't going to let us just go into like the Amazon or something. But the cool thing about that trip is we went to this fair, and it's called Feira. it's this huge fair that's on Sundays in Rio. This is again 1985. It was an illegal fair. Like all the illegal wildlife trade in Brazil went through this fair. It's like think about it like, uh, many years ago, like the biggest reptile show was the Daytona show, right? Well, this was like that show, but illegal. So it was this long street in the middle of Rio where you could only access it two ways, like one end or the other end. And the beginning of it's like all fruits and vegetables. So you think, oh, you're just in a regular fair, like a street fair, buying fruits. But when you got to the middle, it was insane. People had monkeys. There were like hyacinth macaws. There were all kinds of exotic birds and crocodilians. And then people, of course, had turtles. And we were going nuts. Like there were, redfoot tortoises and a lot of trichemies of all different kinds that I couldn't ID. There were phrynops, hilari. I remember seeing. So that fair was really interesting to see, especially back then. Of course, it no longer exists. I mean, that was like taken down many years ago, but it was a huge impact to see that animal trade. They even had like leopards at this fair. Yeah, so it's pretty wild. But if you want to get into like trips that I went specifically for turtles, like exotic trips, is that something you want to like talk about more, or
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
definitely.
Okay. So let's see. Some of the more memorables. Okay, you mentioned you're going to the Galapagos.
Yeah.
The Galapagos, of course, anyone out there listening that are into turtles, whether it's aquatic or terrestrial. First of all, I like going places that are safe. I feel like, someone's gonna, murder me for my sneakers or something. Galapagos is a place you can go with all age groups, from little kids to your grandmother. In fact, the trip I went to, I went on with Eric with the TC team. We had some of his nephews there. They were in their early 20s, and his mother came. She was like in her late 70s, maybe even her 80s. And it was just perfect for everybody. Now you're not going to see any aquatic turtles in the Galapagos, but if you book the right trip with the right guides, you'll definitely see tortoises. I mean, obviously it's known for that, but people go there a lot for birds. So if you don't go on a specific tortoise trip, you might see a few tortoises and then a ton of birds, but you got to book the trip where people are focused on chelonians. You're also going to see a ton of sea life and sea turtles. We saw so many sea turtles; it was kind of insane. They would just swim right up to you. Hawksbills and green sea turtles, they were everywhere. But that's a place that you definitely got to get to. And before you go, try if you can afford it, get certified for scuba. Because the scuba there is out of this world. You're gonna see stuff you'll never see anywhere else, but you'll also see stuff that is just they're not. I guess I don't know how they're still not used to human contact. But the animals there just have no fear of humans, so they come right up to you. It's very odd, especially the birds. Like you hear, you walk up to a bird, a pigeon, whatever, it flies away. Over there, you're like walk towards the bird, and they're like, oh, they look at you and they walk towards you, and you're like, wait, why aren't you flying away? So
That's awesome.
so these animals, yeah, they're very curious. They're like, okay, why are you here? And so it was very interesting to see that kind of dynamic where they just were not. No fear. And in the water, the sea lions, you hear these things about sea lions they'll come right up to your mask, like literally like right here to your mask, within inches, look at you and then swim away. We saw manta rays. I swam with giant manta rays. I swam with penguins. There was one point where I was filming someone on our trip. Her name is Mie. It was Eric's girlfriend at the time. And they say the sharks in the Galapagos, at least the guides do, they say they're all vegetarian, which is a joke because no one ever gets bit by sharks in the Galapagos on these tours. Apparently, I don't know, but they kept saying, "Oh, the sharks here are vegetarian. Don't worry, just go in the water." And you go in the water, there's sharks everywhere. And this one time I'm filming, and Mia's got her snorkel. She's just swimming, and a school of hammerhead sharks come by, and she's so close to them that her fins are hitting the sharks. That's how close she was. She was literally touching the sharks. Swam. She had no clue she was that close, but she was just literally, So it's pretty wild. I would definitely recommend Galapagos, because you're going to see just a variety, between birds and sharks and manta rays and a ton of wildlife, and the people are amazing there. The place is safe, and the food is fantastic. You're going to eat basically fresh fish every day, and yeah, you're going to love it. I'm jealous that you're going, Jack, soon. And who else is going? Someone else has booked it with you. Was it you, Mike?
I'm well, so I wanted to, but I think it's probably going to conflict with the start of college, so I might not be able to at this point. But
who needs college?
yeah, yeah, I don't know. I got to get these 4 years done. What I might end up doing if they do that trip again is taking a gap semester, like somewhere down the line, and then just do that. So I could also potentially get like leave from school to go do it for a few weeks. So hopefully we'll work something out in the process there.
Yeah.
Well,
you're gonna.
So
I've never left the country.
No, I've never even left the country. The farthest I've been is California and Florida. So this is going to be a hell of a first place to go outside of the United States. It's like going from level 1 to level 100 in one jump.
Yeah. You're gonna love it. Yeah. It's gonna be amazing. Make sure you bring all the camera gear you can.
Yeah, I have some leftover. I have a good chunk of money left over in my budget. I'm probably gonna get some. I'm gonna probably upgrade to the newest GoPro and for underwater footage, and probably get like a Canon or a Nikon or a good camera I can use to take pictures there, not just my phone.
If you have the budget, those little drones by DJI, right? I have a little $500 one. It's probably the best purchase I've ever made. I've taken that on several trips now. It fits in your pocket, literally, and the video and quality is amazing. And to learn how to use it, I learned how to use it in maybe an hour, and I can fly it really well now. So I recommend a drone. DJI, I think it's the Mavic, maybe. I forget which one. It's the smallest one. It's not the smallest, actually. It's like it runs about $500. The one that costs about $500 has a great camera, and the footage is out of this world. Like, you're gonna capture stuff and angles you'll never be able to, obviously, with a handheld device. So you can get, especially on an island, that's going to be cool to fly up a drone up above you and then zoom back into you.
They let you fly them there, like in certain areas?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I would check online for sure about that if it's allowed there. But I think so. It's Ecuador. I can't imagine that there might be some restricted areas, but I'm sure there are places they're going to let you fly drones. I mean, like if you're on a boat traveling from place to place, taking some drone footage from a boat would be great. So.
Oh yeah, that would be perfect.
Yeah, because imagine you see a pod of whale sharks, and flying up above them and getting some footage. That would be insane. I wish I had. That's the one thing I wish I had on my trip.
The closer I get to it, the more it starts to actually set in that it's actually going to happen. Because I've had the money to do it for years, and it took me a long time to find the right trip. Plus, COVID kind of threw a wrench through the whole thing and set me back like 2 years. So now that it's actually set in stone, I'm like, I'm going to see all of this stuff. Like, there's so much, like, I can't even begin to, like, understand how awesome it's going to be. Like, that's just what it's been on my mind all the time now.
That's awesome.
There's something about the first trip out of out of the country that's interesting, and the fact that like we've read all about these places, but actually being there is a totally different experience. You really realize how much bigger the world is than kind of
Yeah.
what you've come to see in the United States, I guess.
Yeah, and the cultures, it's a huge shock. Like my first time in
Yeah.
Madagascar was like that, like insane.
Yeah.
Uh, s- I've never been to a place where it felt sort of prehistoric in parts. You know, there are parts obviously you fly into Antananarivo, and that's the main city. It was colonized by the French, so it's you know it's what you expect from a third world country kind of thing. But we went to a part of Bali Bay where I would say is I felt like I went back in time thousands of years, where the people were barefoot, barely clothed, and they lived in um, little wooden huts that they made with pieces of wood and thatched roofs. I mean, it was like you were in the Stone Age. Like these people were basically hunter gatherers. You know, there was no farming. It was so hot there. There was no, you didn't really see much farming. They maybe farmed very little, but they were really just living off the land. You know, catching birds, catching. You know, they're right on the ocean, so a lot of fish in their diet, some fruit from the forest, and they were eating, you know, rodents from the forest, whatever they can catch. But that was really a shocker to see that people out there are still living like the Stone Age, and doing well. I mean, these people were healthy. You know, Americans with our diets and all the carbs and sugar we eat, these people, they were all ripped. They had like
Yeah.
6-pack abs, and you're like, what? Do you guys work out? You know, it's like, no, because they every day, you know, they got to walk miles and miles to catch their food, you know, and they're eating a very healthy, natural diet, and they were happy. I mean, so it's interesting to see that contrast.
That's a good point. When I went with the TSA for the big confiscation, the same exact thing. And it's like, I mean, at the time I was an eighth grader, so it was a huge kind of change of pace. But yeah, I just remember distinctly after the airport, we got in that car, and for 10 minutes getting to the hotel, that was the wildest drive I've ever been on. I mean, the streets there, and just there's not really any lanes. I seem to recall. You kind of just drive wherever, and there's people
Right.
on Zebu, and it's just it's crazy. I mean, you think LA is crazy. This is a different level. But
Well,
yeah,
this is great. So also Madagascar, the when it was so dry when I was there, like you're mentioning the roads, that we were on some dirt roads that had obviously, you know, potholes everywhere, and it started to rain one time, and this is a like the southern Madagascar. It was so dry. It started to rain, and people started to go into the street and bathe in those puddles. They were literally just like, okay, there's water available. Let me take a bath. And you're like, what is going on? You know, like it's kind of crazy.
I feel like living in such a natural state like that, there's probably not as many like stress related mental like issues and stuff with a lot of people because your mind and body benefits so much from all the like that ridiculous amount of exercise and foraging and stuff because that's what we evolved to do. So we're literally designed for that.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
the modern world kind of removes a lot of that, and then there's nothing really to replace it for humans. It's like, well, you can go buy all the food you ever need, and you just kind of sit around like this. I don't know.
No, I agree. And when you don't know all this stuff, all these distractions, you don't know any better. You're just happy with what you have, you know. You're happy just, you know, catching a fish for dinner and hanging out under the stars. And the stars, if you remember, Michael, like looking up in the stars at night, there's no pollution where you are in Madagascar. It's like looking at like it's unbelievable. It's like the stars light up the sky like you've never seen in your life. You can't see that in America. Not where I live, at least. I've never seen that, but it's remarkable how beautiful the sky is like at night.
I've gotten a small taste of that in a couple roads in real remote parts of Florida, but it's still not the same. It's like you can still see the light pollution on the edges of the horizon, but
Gotcha.
and around here it's like just you're not going to get a great view. It's all just hazy. But
So we're diverging from turtles. So let's
Yeah,
get
that's
back into turtles. So Madagascar. One of the cool things about Madagascar, talking about rain and puddles of water. So we were on a quest at one point to find Planicauda. Okay, Pixie's Planicauda. So to see them, you got to go. Sort of. We were in like central western um, Madagascar, and it's called the Kurindi Forest. So that was like absolutely one of the most amazing trips ever. And it was part of this trip where we went there and also went up to see Unifera, which I get into a little later. So on the trip to Corindi, you go through obviously these roads that it's like this red clay. If you can imagine, the roads are all this red clay, full of potholes. So you're not driving more than 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, or you're gonna like break your axle. And a lot of these, and since the Corindi is just a lot wetter, the potholes would fill up with water. And I remember we had so many people in a car. We had, Anders Rodin, Russ Mittermeier, Peter Paul Van Dyke, and Eric, myself, and we were going down these roads. And I was younger. I'm a little bit younger than them, so I'm like in the back, kind of standing up and looking down at these puddles. And I kept seeing what I thought were little turtle heads coming out of the puddles. And I thought, maybe it's just my imagination. It's crazy that there'd be turtles in these ponds, right? And then I finally gave up and I said, guys, stop the car. And they're like, what do you mean stop the car? We got to get to the Corindi. It's like, no, stop the car. I'm telling you, there are turtles in these little puddles. We keep driving through these puddles. There's little baby, they're little turtles in there. They're like, yes, they're like, all right, you're going a little crazy.
They
No
think
problem.
you're going
But
crazy.
they think I'm going crazy because we're traveling at some speed, and I'm talking when we do stop eventually. These are hatchling turtles. These are not adults. So yeah, we stop the car and we start sifting through, and we start picking up little Pelomedusa, and they're tiny, tiny turtles. They must have, the parents must have laid eggs near the road because it was exposed, and instead of going towards the swamp, they went towards the water and in the puddles. And we go in there and we sift through. We catch several. All of us start, and then we start all going crazy, like to every puddle. We're like looking for baby turtles. But yeah, we found a bunch of turtles just right in the road. Didn't even have to leave the road. So that was cool. And then we get to the Kurindi Forest. There's a there's a there's a famous cemetery that John Baylor had gone to. He always talked about this cemetery where the Planicauda would just be walking around the gravestones. And we of course had to go to the cemetery, and they did this whole the natives in the area, they made us buy some rum, and they did this whole, like, they blessed us, and it was really odd, like this little ceremony they did where they were blessing us to be able to walk safely through the cemetery. So we obliged, of course. We didn't want to disrespect anyone. We sat there, went through the whole thing, and I think it was just so we could buy them rum, really, and they could drink the rum. But in the end, they used the rum a little to bless us, kind of sprinkle a little, and I think they drank most of it. But we get to the cemetery, and we didn't see Planicauda, but the amount of snakes we saw was insane, and different species. We were just finding snake after snake after snake. And the cool thing was, like, we were there with Gerald Kuchling also, and Gerald kept saying to us, "Oh, don't, just grab whatever snake you want, you can just grab them. There are no poisonous snakes in Madagascar." And I was like, "Oh, okay, fantastic." So any snake we saw, we just like grab it, no matter what. Turn around, if it bit you, you didn't care. It wasn't poisonous. At one point, I catch a snake, and then Gerald looks at me and goes, "Yeah, but there is one poisonous snake in Madagascar, and Maurice, you have it in your hand right now." So I was like, I kind of freaked out, but it was it didn't bite me, thankfully, and it was a rear fanged poisonous snake. I can't remember the genus now. I wish I remember that, but that was a little scary situation where you have a poisonous snake in your hand, and you don't know it. You're just like, okay. But that's definitely recommended if you ever go to Madagascar. Try to get to the Kurindi Forest. So after the cemetery, we went into the deep forest where these Germans were studying different wildlife, and they had a camp there. And as soon as we get there, we see a fusa. If you know what that is, that's sort of like a big dog, between a dog and a cat. Actually, it's really it's a mixture of a dog and a cat, and they hunt lemurs. So there's a lemur specialist, and of course we saw lemurs. And in the forest, I mean, it's this giant forest with very little sunlight. When you're in the forest, very little sunlight's hitting the ground, but there's like dappled sunlight, and while you're walking through, we found platycauda. They're just walking around, and because there's very little sunlight, the moisture just stays on the ground certain times of year, and all the platycauda just had moss on their backs, like this beautiful green moss, and they're just walking around looking for mushrooms, and that was amazing to be able to find them. And then of course at night you got to get a good headlamp, and that's a recommendation. Anyone going anywhere, okay, all you guys listening here, make sure you have a really good headlamp wherever you go.
I'll write that
I mean,
down.
that's important. Yeah, because at night, a lot of these places, you know, you're looking for turtles. You're looking for turtles during the day, but at night, some of these places have amazing wildlife, especially Madagascar. With a headlamp, you could shine and see, you know, lemurs and obviously chameleons like from a mile away. A chameleon's like with a headlamp, you could just spot them from really far. And we found tons of chameleons, and other wildlife just like peering down at you. Definitely make sure you bring one to Galapagos. Yeah, you'll probably see some stuff at night.
100%. I'm going to do that now.
Yeah, yeah. But other parts of Madagascar, interesting. Then we went up north to Bali Bay, and of course Bali Bay, everyone knows if you're into turtles, you know the unifera up there. You fly into Sualala. It's probably the smallest airport I've ever been to. It's not even an airport. It's like a field, like someone's field with grass and dirt. And the airport, like, you know, where you think your bags come out, it's like this little thatched roof wooden hut, and they bring out your bags there, and it's like, it's kind of funny. It's like you're in the Flintstones kind of thing. And and so we get our bags, and then you go to town, you load up on water and whatever, and to get to Bali Bay we had to take a boat, and we took a little tiny boat. Like the boat, when we were there, it was sort of in disrepair. We met up with Durrell, and they have this tiny boat, so you plan on getting wet because you're going across like a bay with waves. And if you're in a tiny boat, you know, the water's just pounding you. And so we barely crossed because the engine had trouble. It's like kind of a long story, but we ended up getting to the other side. And that's where I saw those very primitive people living in Bali Bay, right on the beach there. And then you take a long hike into the forest. And it's like a bamboo scrub forest, and there are other, you know, types of vegetation, but it's very low. It's not like 100-foot trees. You're looking at very maybe 20 feet max as like the tallest plant or something. And we went to a release site there, and some of the work that we were doing was trying to get, because our goal at TC was to get some platycauda at some point. So it was important to us, number one, to see how they really live in nature, so we can try to duplicate that at our place in California, whether it be the plant life that they eat or just the soil that they're on, or whatever. Just make conditions for them comfortable so they can breed. So we put data loggers at the release site. We saw animals that were getting ready to be released. They're about the size of a basketball, you know, and put these data loggers out. And then we went out to a lake, and there was a woman fishing, and we were just kind of talking. And while she's fishing, she catches Arimnakellies, like literally catches a small, I don't know, maybe 8-inch Arimnakellies. And we just like pounced on her, and she's just like, what is going on? This is my lunch. Like, leave me alone, kind of thing, you know? So we basically take her turtle from her, and we gave her some money because we're like, we felt bad. Obviously, we're taking her lunch away from her. So we gave her some money, and she was okay and just let us take the turtle. We took the turtle, and we're all, we took a million photographs of it, and then we were spotting them. You could see their heads popping up in that lake. So there were obviously adults in there, but we were also told there were crocodiles in there, and we shouldn't swim, but that didn't stop us. Gerald Kuchling got in his speedos and went into and he's like snorkeling around, and we all went in the water looking for them. We didn't catch any more, but we definitely saw a bunch of Rimnakellies in that lake. That was really, really fun. And then there, cross to Kapsada, which is on the other side of Bali Bay. And Kapsada is just this. If you look on a map, Google Earth, you'll see it's just like this little peninsula or a little point that comes out, and that's where I first saw tortoises in the wild. We obviously saw them in nature in a captive site. They were fenced in the release site, but and they were in the area where the just didn't find them. They're very cryptic, but we actually started to see them in the wild. We saw adults, we saw males, females, and then I just got super lucky that day, and I found a hatchling. And I started to call out and say, "Hey, there's a hat," and people thought I was joking, but they ran over, and I actually had a little baby unifera in my hand, and of course, everyone's got a camera. We took another million pictures of the hatchling with the adults, and that was really interesting to see see them in nature, see the harsh conditions that they live. In the summer, it's brutal. I mean, there's very little shade. They have to go into the bamboo thickets to get to the shade. But what you do notice is they're on very rocky soils, um, volcanic soils in some areas, and you see a lot of people keep animals in captivity, and they keep them on grass and all these things. That's not how they live in the wild. And you see their beaks in captivity. Their beaks are overgrown, or their nails are super long. Well, these animals are constantly, using their nails on this rough soil and trimming their beaks in nature, and they don't have those problems in nature. So we should learn from that and kind of give them maybe a little rougher terrain so they can mow down, like keep their nails trimmed and their beaks trimmed, and then give them more exercise. A lot of turtles in captivity you'll see are, have problems walking or all kinds of issues because we just don't give them a rough environment. We just make it too nice for them. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. But just in general, that's how I've always looked at like captive keeping of turtles. Is I always try and take a lot of inspiration and knowledge from how they're living in the wild, replicate that as best as I can, and it's always pretty successful and the animals always tend to do best.
Exactly. So and that's sort of the point of why we went there. If we're going to keep something at the center at the Turtle Conservancy, one of the things me and Eric always said, we were going to go visit where they lived, so we can do the best job we could, raising these animals, and not, obviously you can breed snakes in a sweater box in your closet, but do you really want to do that? Do you? Isn't it? Do you want to give these animals a little better quality of life? And our motto at the TC, and some of you have been there, you'll see the enclosures are large. We give them a lot of a lot of area to move around and exercise. I think that's very important to give these animals the best quality of life you can, especially if you're going to get out of nature.
To circle back to what we were talking about a bit off air, could you go into the origins of the TC and like your role in its creation and
Sure.
its early sort of start?
Yeah, no problem. So a little background on me. So I when I was 15, I believe I started volunteering at zoos. Right, like this passion for turtles is just so big. I had to go be part of like the turtle world. So my first my first volunteer position was at the Turtleback Zoo in New Jersey, and that's because it was just so close to my house. That's where I met Alan Faust. He kind of was a mentor early on, and he had a lot of different turtle species. And he recommended if I ever had the chance, when I get a driver's license, go to the Bronx Zoo. So as soon as I got a driver's license and was able, I was in college at the time. I went to the Bronx Zoo, and I remember just going through the reptile house, through the public area, and then there was a door that had it just said staff on it, and I said, "Hey, what the heck? Let me knock on this door." And I knock on the door, and someone shows up and says, like, "Who the hell are you? Like, why are you knocking on my door?" I was like, "Hey," and I was just like, right there, I just said, "Hey, I'd like to volunteer. Is there any chance of becoming a volunteer here at the reptile house?" And he's like, he looked at me, he's like, "Yeah, you know what?" It was Rich Cirilli. He was the senior keeper at the time, real tough guy with tattoos, and he lets me in. He says, "Yeah, yeah, come in, talk to Bill Holmstrom." Bill's the collections manager, and Bill said, "Yeah, just fill out this paperwork, but we're very strict." They said, "If you want to be a volunteer, it's not like show up anytime you want. You got to have a strict schedule. You show up when the staff shows up, you leave when the staff leaves, and you work all day. If you're not coming here for an hour or two just to look at turtles or whatever." And I said, "No problem. I have no problem with that." So I started to go every Sunday, like people go to church. That was my church. I mean, every Sunday I drive up to the Bronx, show up there, 8:30 in the morning, work till they left, and that's how I met John. And John was the curator of herpetology at the Bronx Zoo at the time. And man, if he was alive today, if you put him on this podcast, you would need like 4 or 5 hours of time because he has stories. He was a storyteller, I mean, by nature, but he could tell you stories that would just keep you so captivated. You'd be here all day. But getting to know John, I really started to get into turtle conservation. That's kind of the pivotal point, I think, in my life and my career, where I went from just being a hobbyist that kept turtles and was like interested in keeping turtles at home to actually learning about conservation. Like, how do I apply what I learned, keeping turtles, to maybe doing something where I can help save them in the wild. So me and John became actually pretty good friends. I went on trips with him in nature looking for, wood turtles and spotted turtles and bog turtles in his sites. And then uh, the Bronx Zoo, for about 30 years, they had a lease to keep animals on St. Catherine's Island. It's an island off the coast of southern Georgia. It's owned by the Wrigley family, I believe, Wrigley Gum. Uh, so they own this giant island, thousands of acres. I think it's the size of Manhattan or something like that. And they had a lease with the WCS to keep their tortoises there. So they had a few unifera. They had Burmese mountain tortoises, pixies, a bunch of pixies. So they had a 30-year lease that was about to expire, and WCS, for some reason, wasn't able to convince the family to renew the lease. They were actually thinking that no problem, we're just going to renew it for another 30 years. But some reason, they had a falling out of some sort, or maybe the owners just didn't want to have them there. And I don't know what the exact reason was, but the 30-year lease was up. So John comes to me. He goes, "Maurice, I know you work for Eric. Eric's a very wealthy guy. If other people listening don't understand, Eric at the time was building hotels in New York, but he had a long history in New York of nightclubs. From nightclubs, he went into restaurants, and from restaurants, he went to hotels. So he made very good money, obviously, from these businesses. So he had some land in California, in Ojai, which some of you have been to, and always wanted to do something with turtles and tortoises. So I was working for Eric. We talked about doing a little turtle center out in Ojai because the weather's perfect for tortoises. So when John approached me, he goes, Maurice, we don't want to break up these animals. They've been together, some of them for 30 years. They're the breeding groups now, and it's such a large collection that it'd be hard to be able to send them to one zoo, one institution. We'd like to move them all together someplace. You think you and Eric would help us? And I said, well, look, I can only ask Eric and see what he says. So I talked to Eric. Eric was, immediately is like, of course, no problem. Let's do it. So we arranged a dinner at one of Eric's restaurants. It's called Matsuri. Is a Japanese restaurant. Me, Eric, John Baylor, and Bill Holmstrom sat at this dinner, and we hashed out a plan to build the Turtle Conservancy. That's literally how it started, right there at that dinner at this Japanese restaurant that Eric owned. And so the three board members, or three founders, were me, Eric, and John. And that was in 2004 when we met, and we started building. Me and Eric would fly out it seemed like every month. We'd fly from New York to California, and we started building. We started just building enclosures. We had no animals there, and at some point when we had enough enclosures built, we flew to St. Catharines, rented a U-Haul, loaded up all the animals, and then I drove. Eric was very busy with his businesses, but I drove them with the keeper that was keeping them in St. Catharines. She was the lead keeper. She agreed to work for us in Ojai, so she quit her job, with WCS. She came on board with the TC, and this guy Lucas, who still works for TC out in Ojai. We basically drove across country with 200 animals in a U-Haul. It was amazing. And if you go online, I think some of these videos, if you go to the TC Turtle Conservancy YouTube, some of these videos are on there. I think the video of our adventure across country might be on there. So we get to Ojai, we unload, and we start putting them in all their enclosures, and they did quite well. I mean, a lot of the animals we still have out there, like the Burmese mountains. The radiated tortoises are still out there. The pixies, unfortunately, didn't do too well in Ojai, but we still have a few. But yeah, that's how we started. That's how the TC started, right there.
That's awesome. That's amazing. That's a
That's great.
incredible story. I've heard like bits and pieces of it, but I don't think I've heard it that continuous, kind of the genesis.
Yeah, that's
of it.
the first time I've heard it told like by someone who was a part of it. And like actually, I've only just heard little anecdotes here and there. I've never actually gotten the full picture.
I'm curious. So one thing we talk about a lot on here is in situ kind of adventures and research, and just I think we're all on the side of like we see the value in ex situ work, so with captive animals. But like, what would you say? How would you kind of justify that to someone who doesn't necessarily understand the purpose of having kind of collections in captivity?
Well, look, I think part of the reason I want to preserve nature and preserve these turtles in nature is because I keep them myself, right? Like as a child growing up, I've had turtles, and sure, there are probably a lot of turtles I shouldn't have had, and not all turtles make it, right? You lose some. It's sad, but by keeping them in captivity, it motivated me to want to be involved in preserving them in nature. And the truth is, some turtles and some countries are just not safe enough right now at this moment in time and if you don't, so basically if you don't preserve them in captivity, there's probably no hope for some of these species, right, in their countries. And one of them is Unifera. Unifera, the country is poor, the government seems to be corrupt. I mean, when I was there in 2007, the new president, he just became president. He was a former DJ at a nightclub. Okay, this is no joke. The guy went from DJ at a nightclub, right, to president of a country. Okay, so you know, just think about that, how crazy that is. Okay, so can a guy that was a DJ really run a country properly? Probably not. So it was in disarray, and I know since I've been there, the populations of Unifera have been under a tremendous amount of pressure. The government, last time I was there, the government had made a deal with the Chinese mining, and it just so happens they wanted to open up an open pit mine right near where Unifera was, which means they're going to have all the equipment, all these people, these and foreigners coming to that area with Unifera. They're just going to put them in their suitcases and bring them back home. So in that case, if you don't have captive situation for Unifera, they're going to go extinct. Period. There's just no doubt about it. I mean, I absolutely believe like a species like Unifera needs captive assistance. Another one is Quora McCordi, an animal which I keep and have a few. They're gone in nature. They're so valuable in China and in their right mind, where they exist in China. Find one on the ground, they would be insane. Just leave it there because the money they can make, they can support their family for months, or I don't know, maybe longer, if they find one and sell one, right? So why wouldn't you do that, right? If you're poor, you got to feed your kids. Your kids come before turtles, right? So it doesn't make sense. So Quora needs captive breeding, and maybe someday where we can create a preserve in China and really need these captive colonies, or they're just. I'm dealing with these Cheecher Van Dyke, which some of you have seen at my house. There were only 5 of the United States, and there are only 5 that we know of in captivity anywhere in the world. Like the whole planet, there are 5 in captivity. So if something happens in Myanmar, which they come from Myanmar, and we all know the political situation in Myanmar is pretty bad right now. The military is back control. You don't know. They might start mining the beaches, which they are. They mine the beaches for sand for construction, which impacts the nesting beaches. Eggs are the turtles. They have no place to nest. They also find the adults. They eat them. Soft-shelled turtles are a delicacy in Asia. They eat them here in the United States too, as you know. So if something really turns for the worst in Myanmar, you need a captive population somewhere so you can possibly produce hatchlings to release one day when it's safe. So I'm a big believer in balance, and obviously a lot of species you don't need captive captive colonies of, but it's good to learn how to breed them just in case you need to one day.
Yeah, I think the idea of building an invisible ark makes sense, and I think we all kind of see that. And a lot of people that's one of the questions I get when I help with the tours at the TC a few times in the past, and a lot of people, that's one of their first questions: why does this matter? Kind of. And I think that in that hour and a half that they go through there, everyone comes away really understanding kind of what the purpose of I guess assurance colonies is. So,
Yeah.
but
When you see the full scope of the trade and how much money is involved, like it makes like preserving some of these animals in situ is like, in order to do that like successfully, you'd have to pretty much vanquish the government in China and or find some way to overpower like the forces of money and like politics, which is just like almost impossible.
And it's such as it's also a cultural thing, right? The Chinese, it's obviously Chinese culture. They've been around for thousands of years, way older culture than the U.S. And part of their culture is to eat turtles or use turtles for medicinal purposes. It's not something you do here in America, but it's a cultural thing in China. So it's hard to change those cultural perceptions. It's just a difficult thing to do, but I think it's something that's important that people kind of try to educate, yeah, educate so they veer off, using, turtles to cure cancer, and maybe use some other type of, drugs or something that's not going to have such a bad impact. But culture has a lot to do with how people preserve animals. And a good example, going back to Madagascar, there's a taboo. It's called a fadi. The native people in Madagascar, they have a taboo for eating tortoises. So for many, many years, the radiated tortoises, pixie stir, they were okay. No one was touching them. No one was eating them. It was only until foreigners started coming in, and from other areas, that they didn't have this body. They didn't have a taboo. They're like, this is part of my culture. They started to decimate and eat the radiated tortoises. So populations are declining rapidly, not because of the natives. It's because of others. So that's really important. Culture has a lot to do with how people preserve their animals.
And Maurice, if I'm not mistaken, you've also worked with the Ploughshare tortoises in Madagascar. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
we're curious, like, what you think about, where like the projections of like how many are left, or any other situations that we could help.
yeah. So in my mind, I think the best thing for the plowshare in nature, the area is not so large, right? Especially Kopsada, it's not a huge area. If they could create a national park, like that is actually secured, where they could, even almost fence it in. It's not an impossible thing to do. Is create a fence that peninsula in and really put the right type of protection, and more importantly, have some kind of, like doctoral students, some kind of outside governance, because the problem is the natives that we actually helped fund through Durrell. Durrell's been working there for many years on Ploughshare. We helped fund protection, which means we hired local people to protect the tortoises. But it turned out that these locals, they were picking up hatchlings, trying to protect them and selling the hatchlings, right? Because they're so poor. You got to understand how poor they are. One hatchling, supports them for a year. So I think you need some kind of outside governance in that case, where you had, for instance, maybe you guys are going to school soon, a doctoral student studying, studying tortoises or studying the plant life, whatever, anything in that area, the lemurs. If you had like a presence of people and somehow supported the local community, if you have people outsiders there, they're going to need support from locals. You pay them a salary to help you, whatever. You're going to need people to cook for you. You're going to need people to help, whatever. So I think if you could kind of create like an ecotourism there and have some kind of outside governance a little bit to watch what they're doing, and show them that they can also make a long-term sustainable income by not removing the tortoises, by not taking them out of there. It was a long-term vision. You can maybe protect them a little better. But right now, there's no other income. What are they, what are they doing out there? A tortoise, if you're poor and a tortoise could support you and your family for a year, you're going to do it. We gotta make alternatives for them, so they don't do it. I think that's the most important thing in that region.
Well, and these wildlife dealers come in and kind of hop around between little areas, and they'll offer the local people there, I mean, thousands of US dollars, which translates to a lot in I forget the currency in it, but it's just, yeah, if you can beat out that price, which would still be hard regardless, but ecotourism sounds like it would be. I guess the only downside potentially is that you bring attention to them, but at the same rate, like, you look at models in other countries and typically it works pretty well in terms of it's all positive attention. The guys who want to decimate the ecosystem kind of already know about that. So
correct.
Yeah.
And Galapagos is a good example of a positive, right? Galapagos tourism brings in millions and millions of dollars that therefore help preserve the tortoises. If it wasn't for all the tourism in the Galapagos, they would probably be in a similar situation where poaching would just be more valuable. You got to make something else more valuable than poaching, and make people understand that there's a long-term gain here instead of a short-term. Okay, grab a tortoise, sell the tortoise. Tortoise is gone, no more money. But if you have tourism, you have money coming in steadily. You have people just, So Galapagos is a good model for that.
Yeah, and I think too, in terms of like, I guess putting an economic value to nature typically is nice when
Yeah.
it comes to legislation too. I mean, in Madagascar, the government, like you said, I think it has maybe the record for the shortest presidency was like 6 days before there was a coup and something like that. But that's tougher. But yeah, in a lot of these places, if you can like justify that, then legislative purposes become a lot easier for the animals, at least.
Exactly. Look, it's different. It's difficult, and you don't have the same solution for every species. That's something that'll never happen. Every species of turtle requires a different, solution, a different method. Some turtles, you just protect the habitat, buy a piece of land, and like we're doing with Bolson tortoise, buy the land, fence it in, and they should be okay. Because there's not a lot of tourism, a lot of people where the Bolson tortoise is from. But other places, you need different solutions, So you really got to, get with the right people and come up with something that works. But it's very difficult. I have to say, working with conservation, you always have to add in that human factor. Ideally, you would think, oh, let's just preserve the land and that's it. But if you don't factor in people and the locals, you're going to fail. You have to factor in what you're doing to the local communities, who has access to those areas. It's very important that you factor all that in, or you're not going to make it.
Right. It's I mean, you can see how this could be a perhaps a potentially contentious or controversial topic, but Michael and I, we were also talking about this when we met up at in Atlanta. We're talking about how South Africa has been so successful conservationally with regards to like rhinos, and ironically that's due to trophy hunters largely, how they bring in revenue.
Yeah. Well, look, in America, it's sort of the same thing, right? Most
Right,
of
yeah.
our wildlife in America is preserved from hunting and fishing licenses and the taxes on that equipment, right? So, a lot of people might have this bad, perception of hunters, like, oh, hunters are bad people. But the hunters and fishermen in America, we preserve the land. I mean, it's like the amount of money that comes in from just people donating to preserve is disproportionate by so much to what comes in from the taxes and fishing licenses and hunting licenses. So you have to, like I said, you always have to factor in people, or conservation doesn't work.
Yeah, I think we typically have, when we're using a resource and it's benefiting us in some way beside economically. I mean, when it comes to these reptile dealers taking things out of the wild, they don't care if it's still there. But when it comes to using it as a food source or something that gives back, typically, I mean, I've seen this in Madagascar and other places, that people have a respect for the resource in terms of how they're harvesting it, that kind of thing. But the thing that we're really dealing with is unsustainable harvest, which I think is mostly in the form of poaching. And I think that there's certain situations where you can kind of get out of that natural equilibrium, but a lot of kind of native populations have learned to kind of cope with the resource and use it sustainably. And I think a lot of times that works, but when you add the poaching pressure onto a lot of these things, the population just crashes and you can't really deal with it much. So
Agreed. Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, we're coming up on time here. I guess we have got we do a little game at the end.
Game.
A
Okay.
little trivia volley here. And I guess yeah. So if you've got like 4 or 5 turtle questions, you can make them obscure, like turtle trivia, and then you can just ask all of us, throw it up in the air, and then I don't know if you want us to we could do a volley if you want to get some questions from us, or we could just.
Oh,
go
I'd like to get some questions.
right.
I'm
All
always learning. I don't know everything about turtles. I try to learn something every day. So, but I could ask you a simple question. What is the largest land in North America? Land
was that?
reptile. The largest land reptile in North America.
Is that the Komodo dragon?
North America?
North
No.
America.
Oh
Yeah.
shoot!
Is
I'm
it the
not
Bolson
thinking
tortoise?
right. I didn't hear that.
Is it the Bolson tortoise?
Correct. The Bolson tortoises get about 40 pounds, and you wouldn't think, obviously you have alligators that grow huge, but they're aquatic. So on land, the Bolson tortoise is the largest land reptile, in North America. So
Have you seen them in the wild? I'd assume you.
yes, I've seen several. As you know, the Turtle Conservancy is preserving land there. We have several thousand acres that we've purchased. Purchased two properties that aren't connected. Hopefully, one day we can connect them. But there are estimated on those properties to be about 10% of the remaining population. Which is a good number of tortoises. But yeah, I've seen them in the wild. I've seen adults. I've seen not hatchlings, but like young yearlings, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I found interesting is in Pritchard's Encyclopedia of Turtles. He said that, like, he cited specimens that were like 27 inches or something huge like that.
Yeah.
Or like, has there been anything even close to that, or do you see them mostly around like 18 inches or so? Like,
I guess I've seen maybe an 18 to 20 inch. Yeah, is probably the biggest I've seen. I haven't seen something as big as
27 inches. That'd be a big tortoise. That's bigger than a
Yeah.
lot of sulcatas. Like that's. And he said there was shells in restaurants or something. I don't know, but that's so long ago. I don't know if it's the big ones, if they don't get that big anymore, or what the deal is. But that's something.
Yeah, maybe there's some out there. I'd have to check. I haven't really looked at the numbers on that, but possibly there's still some out there. Especially, it's such a remote area that it doesn't get a lot of traffic there. So there's a possibility that animals are still growing pretty old and big there. In fact, I'm going to New Mexico in April for our TC board meeting, and Ted Turner has these giant ranches. I mean, hundreds of thousands of acres of land, and he's breeding Bolson tortoise. So we're going there to see his breeding facility. I saw it many years ago, but it's been doing so well. So we're going back to kind of check up on the animals and see how they're doing. And I'll see how big. Maybe he's got some real big ones there, but he's had them for many years and they're breeding. And his plan is to kind of populate his property because they used to be in southern U.S. I mean, if you look at history, the Bolson tortoise did occupy southern parts of southern United States, but they were extirpated. They believe maybe by the Indians at some point ate them or whatever, some kind of development. But he's trying to bring them back.
That's really cool.
We've spoken about that a bit before on one of our episodes in terms of
Yeah.
like what caused that. But
Definitely, like if you get any information, I'd be happy to know if he's seen really big ones like that, or if he has really big ones. Because, well, yeah, I've just always said like that was an old like project of mine, is like just finding all the size records for most of the terrestrial tortoises, because a lot of them get a lot bigger than most people realize, or they have the potential to. So that's something that it's always just
Exactly
been so captivated by. But
largest land reptile in North America.
all right, we'll hit you with the question, Maurice, if that works.
Okay.
I've got 2 in my mind right now, but I don't know if anyone else wants to start us off here.
I think you got it,
Why
Michael.
don't you go ahead, Michael, if you got a couple
Okay.
at the ready.
So this is one that's kind of interesting. It's current. What is the most recent Meso Clemmy's species that was described.
Oh,
This was last year.
oh, jeez. I haven't been keeping up with stuff like that. Mesoclemmies. Yeah, no. Since my house flooded, I haven't been keeping up with stuff. So what is it?
That's fair. I mean, I don't think most people. So this was the Gerudi toad-headed turtle, Mesoclemys gerudiensis. I
Oh,
think the description, I read through it a few weeks ago, and it's kind of interesting. I think that there's definitely they only had 8 animals to compare to a pretty limited sample size, and I think that compounds kind of both the morphological aspect they used and maybe kind of the potential error there. I think that it was an interesting paper, obviously, but there's a lot to learn. But yeah, that was the
Now,
most recent one.
where is it from? South America, obviously, but what country?
It's Brazil, so it's in, I think, Para state, and it's in an area that's only about 2,000 square kilometers. So it's
Okay.
a really restricted area. There was also last year at one point too, I think they synonymized the Heliostemma with Raniceps and then proposed the name Wormithii, and that was right around the same time. So I guess that would have worked too. But yeah, there's been
Okay.
a lot there. So
And who described that new species?
it was I think Fabio Cunha was the lead author on the paper, but I think it came out of the Brazil. I think Sequa. There's a group out there. I don't know.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's what. But yeah, that's the most recent one. So that was kind of interesting, I guess.
That's very cool. There are a lot of new turtles coming out probably soon. A good friend of mine, as you guys know, Bill McCord, he is working on several right now with Medi Josephuni. There's a bunch of stuff coming out of Australia that's going to be new. You guys will see soon, but pretty exciting stuff.
Cool. All right, if you got a question, we can go.
Question. Oh my God, I didn't think much about this. Any of you from New Jersey?
I'm in Delaware, so I know a good amount about
Yeah.
Jersey. I go
All
there
right. So
frequently.
how many species of chelonians
Oh gosh.
in New Jersey? Anyone?
All right. It might take me a second. I'm gonna see if I can get this.
Yeah, if we thought about it, I think this could take a while though.
Yeah. Hey, Jack's spinning some wheels. He'll figure it out.
Hold on. I'm just
It'll
making
be-
sure I didn't miss one. You're not including sea turtles, just the terrestrial turtles?
No,
Oh,
just terrestrial turtles. Yeah, aquatic turtles.
okay,
But if you
so,
want to get the sea turtles, there are 5.
yeah, so
Yeah, lots of
I said 12, including the slider.
Including the red ear slider.
Yeah.
I believe there's 13.
What I miss?
13. Diamondback. Did you get the Diamondback?
Yeah, I included the diamondback.
Okay, you got Bog
my God.
Turtles.
I must have not included one of the bog turtles or spotteds. I must have missed one of them.
You got Bog, Spotted, Wood, Box, Mud, Musk, Red Belly, Mat,
Soft
Spiny
shell.
Soft Shell.
Yep.
Oh, the soft shell, yeah.
Yeah, the soft shell. Southern Jersey has those. What else? Did we get the red belly?
Yeah, I got the red belly in there. I have the red bellies.
painted, snapping, and then the slider. So that would be 13.
Oh yeah, those the two bone shells on there. Those are both rubber from like lakes and
nice.
stuff near me.
I don't know
Very
if we count the slider in the native fauna, but sure.
Well, it's becoming pretty.
I guess.
Yeah. But
That's
yeah,
kind of-
but I've actually found even yellow belly cooters in New Jersey, in the wild, which is kind of crazy. But Yeah, they're definitely part of the population here. They're breeding actually down the street from me. There's a pond that is they breed red-eared sliders every year. You'll find little hatchlings around there. So, yeah.
Too bad. All right, I guess we can go here. Anyone got
Okay. There's a time limit.
I don't know. Someone's got to have a
Let
question.
me check the chat.
Well, I didn't send. I've got another question, but let's
Go for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this was one. This is an interesting one. So there are 3 subspecies of spider tortoise, and the one from the north has something that's distinct about the plastron. I maybe should, but what is that? So what is like the distinguishing feature for Brygui?
It has a hinge. Yeah.
No, so it's the opposite. I think that it's akinetic and Brygui, and then
Wait.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. I should know this because I've kept all 3 species.
Yeah, but I can see like you
Yeah.
knew where it was going. Just got
Yeah. No, Brygui for sure, and they're a little bit smaller. The Brygui a little bit smaller, and they're fused in the hinge, where Arachnoides get larger, and they definitely have the hinge on the front. Yep. Yeah, you're right. And then Oblonga has the difference on the plastron oblonga. They have the blotches, right? The coloration.
Yeah.
So you could either that can go 2 ways, either about the hinge or the coloration.
Yeah. All right. If you got a question for us, Maurice, we can go a few more here.
Man.
Someone else think of something.
Ask. Okay, what is the largest freshwater turtle ever
We've
recorded?
debated about this before.
Oh,
I
there's
think technically, well, freshwater Rapidus would be the largest technically, but Ketra could also be. It just kind of depends on the validity of the size
Like,
records.
Gotcha.
I'd say like it's pretty much Rapidus and Ketra like neck and neck, but it's hard to tell. But I think the Rapidus might get bigger, and 'cause
Yeah.
there
Well,
are like
the truth is that the Rapidus, we actually have a weight on the largest freshwater turtle. When that male Rapidus from Ho Chi Minh Lake, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, in Vietnam, when it died, or just before it died, it was sick. If you guys recall, it had some fungus, had all kinds of issues. They actually took it out of the water and they weighed it, and it was over 600 pounds. So there's no one has ever weighed a Chitra that big. So for now, that is the largest freshwater turtle that's ever been recorded.
Was it 600 pounds or kg? Because I think it. 600, that would have been. That's huge.
Wait.
I think they had a weight once that was like 340 pounds or something for it. But
I've seen 373 for the weight of that, which would be the largest.
that's still bigger than most freshwater turtles ever documented.
I have to look at those numbers, but yeah, I think it was at one point, for sure, that when they weighed that one turtle from that lake, it was the largest turtle ever weighed.
Well, actually, if it was 6 kg, it'd be like half a ton.
No, it wasn't 600
no,
kilograms. It was like 600 pounds, or I don't know. Maybe I'm off by the numbers, but I know it was heavier than anything that's ever been weighed. So yeah.
Yeah, there was a couple. There was Pritchard's Rapidus book. Like there was a couple caught in the 90s that were about that size too, just in some remote swamps, and they tried to keep these fishermen caught one. They tried to keep it alive for. I think they managed to keep it alive for a week, but it just died from I don't know stress or the overheating or something. And they had waited. They got a weight on it and the carapace length, and it was like 392 pounds. Like it was just shy of 400 pounds, which is just insane. Like
that is the thing.
That just makes the alligator snapping turtles and like the Podocnemus, it makes them look tiny. Like,
yeah. All right, we got another question coming over here. Someone's got to have something.
I got one real quick.
Oh, right,
Jack, if you want to. Okay, so in Ohio, like what two species of soft-shell turtles can you find in Ohio?
Oh, okay. I would assume the smooth and the spiny.
Correct.
There you go.
There you go.
Cool.
All
Smooth.
right.
So have you caught them? And you're from Ohio, I guess?
Yeah. So I've
Where-
seen
where-
a spider. Oh, my bad. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You've seen spiny, but have you found the smooth soft shell?
No, limited to like parts of like southern Ohio, so like the Scioto River, I believe. But I've seen spiny turtles a fair bit.
Wow. Oh, that's cool.
But he's in Orlando right now, so
Nice. That's where I want to be right now. That's in fact, you asked me like what if I could pick one place to go look for aquatic turtles, it'd be the springs in Florida, man. They're just because a lot of reasons a variety of species, and then the access. It's cheap. I mean, to go to Madagascar or go to these exotic places, it's expensive, but you can get a flight from New York to Florida for $200, and a hotel in those areas like $75 to $100, and you're in the water the next day catching turtles. So the Florida Springs probably my favorite place to be. In fact, I had my 50th birthday at the Itchitutney Springs. I spent my 50th birthday during the height of COVID in those springs. I loved it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. They're probably my favorite spots I've ever been to. They're just insane.
Exactly.
yeah. Peter Proschak said something to that effect too at the TTPG meeting. That those were just like when you look at all this traveling he's done, that was still one of the coolest places by far. But all right, I guess if we got one more question on each side, we could do that. I think if we want to just finish it off, Maurice,
Sure.
if you got something else.
Okay.
Start.
Oh
Yeah.
man. I'm not sure. Someone else kick it off.
All right, Ken, Jack.
I was gonna say, unless you got one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, since we talked about the largest soft shell, largest freshwater turtle, what about what's the smallest tortoise species?
Oh, Ken. Oh man, the tortoise. I would say. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Well, I think I would say this: the smallest turtle species is now different than the smallest tortoise. So I guess go with Ken's question, but I guess extra points if the smallest turtle species.
Smallest tortoise species? Geez, would that be the Egyptian tortoise, maybe? Possibly.
It
Yeah, I don't know. Egyptian tortoise?
Michael, what do you think?
it's
On
when
average,
it comes to record, the Homopus or the
Yeah,
Chersovius now,
yeah,
but
yeah, that
Kursovius,
makes sense.
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
That makes
But,
sense. Yeah.
the smallest turtle is now technically based on the most recent checklist, the Cora mud turtle, which was also recently described, and then Votes the Puerto Vallarta mud turtle. They're like 4.3 inches, they're like 4.2 inches max, whereas the Chersovius are 4.3, 4.4. So it's like
Well, look,
technically
I keep Pelusius nanus, and the male nanus are minuscule. I mean, I have adults that are several years old, and they're tiny. So they would rival some of those musk turtles for sure in body mass. Maybe even smaller. I'd argue.
There's definitely, it seems like there's a minimum size that turtles can be. Like there isn't really anything that like 2 inches is like just about. It's really getting there. Is like the maximum size that any mature adult, the minimum size any mature adult turtle is in the world.
Gotcha.
all right, Maurice. If you got one more question, or
One more question. Oh, jeez. Uh,
I don't. Yeah.
hmm. One more turtle question.
Something obscure, something.
Obscure. Okay.
And this podcast off on a high note.
A high note, yeah.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask something really hard too, because
I don't know why I'm a blank right now. What about can you guys name a monotypic genus from southern India, a terrestrial semi-aquatic turtle from southern India that's monotypic?
Yeah, well, I can think of a monotypic genus, but I guess mostly terrestrial, but I might be thinking on the same line as you right now. I'm just trying
Okay.
I was thinking Vijaya Kelly's, but
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
oh yeah,
That's
I forgot.
obscure. Vijaya
That's-
Kelly's Sylvatica, I believe. Peter Proshog, you mentioned Peter. He discovered that animal or named that animal.
yeah, those are cool ones. That's
Yeah.
the biologist it's named after. She was I think she's from India, but she was a female biologist in India, and I guess super like she would camp out in the caves there for months on end.
Exactly.
Studying. Yeah, that's a cool story. Well, I mean, I think we're good to go in terms of everything on here, but I mean, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. I mean, so the stories that you have are just unparalleled. It's really
that was awesome.
we didn't even hit half the stuff we wanted, the Choco Tortoises and all, but we'll get there. Maybe we'll have another something. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
thank you so
get
much.
check out our YouTube video, Turtle Conservancy. There's a bunch of videos. The Argentina trips on there. I believe the Galapagos. There's a few good videos out there. South Africa. Yeah, definitely watch those. And if I could give all you guys advice, get out in nature. Make sure you're exploring, whether it's your backyard or going to an exotic place. Just get out there. You know, it's important.
All right. Thanks so much for
Yeah,
coming
thanks
on.
for coming on. That's awesome.
Thanks for coming up.
No problem. Hope to see some of you guys soon in the field.
Yeah. If
Yes.
All right. Take it
if
easy.
you have a